of the stuff that's already been discussed here today, I'm going to touch on a little bit. I may be bringing in some new concepts that have not been discussed or covered. If you guys have, I like interaction, so if you have a question, I wouldn't mind answering it on the spot. Of course, it's nice if you hold until the end. So without further ado, see how this thing works. There we go. So who is George Butiri? Who am I? I started programming at the age of 11. Became fascinated with simulation games, specifically SimCity, Civilization, the offsprings of those as well, such as SimEarth. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. Turned my passion into a career. Right now I go by many different titles depending on what project I'm working on. In the end, it comes down to just being a problem solver. I take coffee, I turn it into code, and solve things. So my favorite quote of all is, if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life. So in that sense, I'm jobless. Why the moon? Well, there's no earthly distractions. I know a lot of us have the worries about low gravity and what effects come out of that for us. And another good reason for the moon is good for testing things out. I have a couple of pictures there on the right. The Wright brothers didn't land their first flight and then just decide to build the ISS. It took a while until the ISS was even conceived. So they crashed a bunch of times. They tried it again. They really ran the scientific method. Humans, ran through the entire scientific method. The entire time they were trying to get up to space. Let's try this, let's try that. It fails. Even a failure is an answer. So that's always a good thing. So I do mention, or one of my philosophies is to do things incrementally. If you turn the water on, or the heat on the water slowly, you're more likely to boil the frog, otherwise it'll jump right out. So we tend to, as a civilization, as the human race, we tend to be shaken up rather quickly by fast changes, rapid changes. This is all my personal philosophy. So I think that if we initially just start building slowly, everybody's ideas are fantastic, and I feel the same way about them. That yes, we should get to the moon, but the how is the difficult part. And of course, a lot of solutions have been presented, which are fantastic. They're amazing, and just the concepts, and a lot of the concepts that have been presented, I would have never thought in years myself. But yeah, definitely start building slowly. Build a prototype first, see how that works, and then you build small scale, then large scale, and then of course, once we test everything enough, then we can say, okay, let's do the clean slate and go to the moon and start building fresh there. The thing is about all of this, what I'm about to talk about today, is that we have everything ready. We just need to piece it together. It's like a Lego set. We have all the pieces. We just need to assemble them. Unfortunately, I think the instructions are missing, but we'll figure it out by looking on the box. This is what I'll be going over. I'm not going to talk about it and then talk about it again. Base construction. 3D printers are very popular. The most probable way to do this. They're fairly compact when you compare them with what they can accomplish and what they can build. They can receive pre-programmed commands. So being a programmer, I know that even Lego Mindstorms, you can take Legos and program them to assemble things and move around. Initially, we would probably end up building a rail system of sorts. It's not that easy to get around on the moon. There's no concrete that's been set up for us, no paved roads. So initially, the 3D printers, they would print the rail system themselves, and once the rail system is in place, then they can move around a lot more freely. After the first unit is built, then we can start sending people to manage the machines, and it's, again, incremental scale. We will be, the whole goal is to be in complete isolation. And what I mean by that is, not radio silence from Earth, but I'm talking about truly, as the last speaker mentioned, he said, let's be in an environment where we can utilize what's around us without having to depend too much on outside resources. Energy. There's been a lot of solutions presented, which was great. Which solar is a good one, but again, half of the month or half of a month, you're not going to have access to solar power. Yeah, sure, you can use mirror satellites to bounce light from the sun using gold and aluminum, which are really good for reflecting the electromagnetic spectrum, or part of the electromagnetic spectrum that we need, or our plants need. Solar panels, redundancy array of nuclear reactors. Apparently you can build, I found this out recently, but you can build your own backyard nuclear reactor. I don't know if you'd want to, but on the moon, why not? I mean, it's, if you shade it properly, you can get the cold of space to not have the nuclear reactor overheat. There's some benefits out in space or on the moon if you shield it properly. And keep it away, put it in a far distance. And during the nighttime, of course, we, being human, we do like the 24 or 25-hour cycle. So, having full spectrum light bulbs is definitely one way to keep our energy and health up. Air. Some of the concepts that have been brought up about producing air were fantastic with the algae, which could easily be used in much more confined spaces. But I also like the Gaia garden idea, which, free range to move whereabouts you want, big dome, you can let the light shine in. And I've done a little bit of math where, I came out to calculate about 8 trees or 8 average sized trees per human. And if we use fruit trees, they offer multiple benefits. Yes, they do take more water. Yes, they do need to be tended to and taken care of. But you're going to get a lot more than just air out of them, a lot more than just oxygen. You can get, fruit from them, nourishment, energy. And when they get old enough, you can cut them down and use the wood for furniture and toys, things like that. Let's see, grass and algae for extra oxygen if you do happen to have excess gases, because within a confined environment, if you start bringing in materials from the outside, you have a surplus. And all that energy, it has to go somewhere, or it gets converted into other things. So you subtract the oxygen from the surface, we use it, we expand CO2, nitrogen, all those things, and then just have a way to release it throughout the atmosphere. Over a long period of time, the moon may end up having a light atmosphere. Water infiltration. We've been masters of water since the dawn of mankind. We've been able to use it for just about anything, from drinking to food to even building to anything. I mean, we've mastered it. And it's very easy to pull it from not too deep of or not too far of a depth. If we build wells with layers that can filter the water, any water that's used for irrigation and consumption can filter through the earth, through the sand, the rocks, all the different layers of the ground, and essentially ends up in an aquifer where if you build a well down enough, which we've been building wells since as far as I can remember. Living up in a rural area, I've been exposed to a lot of this technology, so to speak. So it's not too difficult of a task if you have the machines help you do some of the work. So we're able to do that, and to further filter it, I've seen this nice little device built out of a tree branch and a rubber hose where you can continue to filter the water. That little device, I've seen it turn muddy water into drinkable water. It was extremely useful in a lot of the villages in Africa that had no access to water. Food and nourishment. I know some of us have talked about not having animals up there, livestock. I'm kind of killing 3 birds with 1 stone, no pun intended. Chickens, I think, are one of the world's perfect foods. Not only do they provide direct nourishment for soups and dishes and cookable food, but they also provide eggs. Eggs, to me, they're the miracle food, simply because the egg white contains all the proteins that the human body will ever need for consumption. So if you just eat egg whites your entire life, and that's it, of course drink some water, but if you just eat the egg whites, you could live as long as a human can. Your body can break down the proteins into everything else it needs. Yeah, plant-based food, that's already been discussed. Of course, it's extremely useful to have additional resources in vegetation and vitamins and minerals. Don't forget about the trees. They're giving us things like avocados, oranges, and apples. And going back to the trees, you can have different or seasonal domes eventually, where you would have apple trees growing seasonally here, and then in 3 months they are growing here, and in 3 more months here. So you can go out and just pick out an apple at any time that you wish. Whereas more tropical fruits, you can go anytime. You just need one of those domes, and you can just go in there and pick them up whenever they grow. Yeah, one chicken can feed a family of 4. You can take the chicken itself, you can make soups out of it, and out of the remaining meat, you can fry it up, and now you got an entire meal for a family of 4. And one added benefit of chickens is that they have feathers. Feathers can be used for insulation. You can make pillows out of them, clothing. So a lot of people don't think about this. So when I said 3 birds with 1 stone is what I meant. Ecology. Whoops, maybe not. So the ecology, as I was mentioning earlier about the trees, you can have multiple domes housing different seasonal fruits. Berries, of course, trees that they can provide, again, back to oxygen or breathable air and food consumption. You can have nurseries. They provide additional trees when necessary. We can even build a ritual. If a human gets born on on the moon, we can even have a ritual where we plant 8 trees. Excess trees could be used to make toys and furniture. So if somebody dies off, you take them, you bury them with, like those little pods. And hemp is very useful, despite of its negative connotation in society today. It can be used to produce a plethora of other products. Biodegradable containers, medicines, lubricants, rope, cloth, etc. The list goes on and on. There's hundreds of these products that you can make out of hemp. Transport. We already use transport belts to transfer people and goods. It's very efficient. It's always on. Having solar power and nuclear power combined, multiple systems of energy, they could always be on. So it's you basically just hop on it and it takes you wherever you want. Variable speeds for different distances. Obviously, you don't want to go 5 miles an hour, for 100 miles. Bicycles can be made using mostly wood and rubber from rubber trees, as you can see there. One thing we should be aware of is if we try to build vehicles, constructing a vehicle is highly polluting. So we want to steer away from that kind of behavior, that kind of practice, which kind of brings me to my next point, where in order for us to accomplish this mission, I think we need to have a little bit of a shift in paradigm in our thinking process. We need to start thinking about not just the future of tomorrow, but more of the future of 1,000 years from now, or even 100,000 years from now. Who knows how we're going to look, how we're going to, because different gravities may affect our children differently. But we need to start thinking that way, and how can we create a society that's sustainable? But waste management is, I'm not sure if many have talked in detail about how do you manage your waste. But it's definitely important. I mean, you go to the bathroom, you go, you take your food, your remaining food, you throw it out. Where are you going to throw it? You're going to pollute the moon? I mean, it's kind of a waste, useless to just waste it like that. Most current packaging pollutes when manufactured and thrown away. So again, try not to do too many things regarding creating non-biodegradable packaging. Anything organic that can decompose, throw it in there, start composting it. Well, I call this one worms and warmth. So you get a whole bunch of decomposing material, you put it in a bin, and I've done this several times where you purchase some worms or you get some worms and you put them in there, and man, they go to town. And by the end of it all, you'll have rich soil, almost fertilizer. And then excess fruit, excrement, urine to be recycled, all this stuff can go through there. And urine actually it's funny enough because urine can get filtered through the ground all the way to that water level. And then of course, obviously you have to treat it and whatnot, but it can get filtered all the way to the water reservoir below when I showed you the well. And then we can actually drink it. The ground itself has several filtering properties that can actually remove many of the toxins from that. And of course, the death, I should have called them burial pods, but I ended up calling them death pods. I added this one last night. Economic system. Yeah, money is good and bad. There's a lot of discussions about that. So this is part of that paradigm shift that we have to go through. The thing is, we can live without it. We've done it in the past. We've been able to, to barter for things. We've been able to share resources, and especially now, we have so many resources, and we know how to build these things and how to acquire them and how to make them self-sustainable. We're not going to go around hitting each other over the head to steal each other's apples. You can go to one of the domes and pick up an apple if you want. No jobs, just tasks. To me, the word job is just, it seems like jail, like it's prison. Nobody, when you ask somebody, it's like, hey, what do you do? Oh, I'm a hermit. Like, oh, okay, that's nice. I met so many people, about 80% of Americans, they either don't have a degree in the profession that they're in, or they absolutely hate their jobs. So the word job itself has a really bad annotation, especially nowadays. What do you got to do? Oh, I got to go to work. I can't do this, that, the other. Just call it tasks. One thing I learned in software development is that developers are more likely to be happy doing tasks rather than told what to do. So what you do is you look this up if you're not familiar with it, the Scrum process. It's pretty cool. It's a pretty cool process. What you do is you create a list of things and you say, okay, this is what needs to be done in order for the overall project to be finished. And you'll just see developers start reading them and like, oh, I could do this one, I could do this one. And they start sharing this stuff. And they share knowledge among themselves. And they start helping each other out. It's almost like there's a much higher reward from accomplishing a task than doing a job. So if we create, even if it's digital, like first come, first serve, it doesn't even matter how we structure it, as long as we realize that there are tasks to be done in order to survive on the moon, a little bit more crucial than finishing a software development project. But yeah, that's definitely one of the ideas to consider. Most dirty jobs would be handled by the machines. Of course, there would be some jobs that could be automated. I can't see what's below there, but there was something else. Yeah, so some jobs could be automated. So one example would be, I don't remember what it was. Okay, so one example would be feeding chickens. Growing up in a rural area, I know that I actually got a little bit of satisfaction going out there with a bowl of grain and just tossing it out at the chickens and watching them eat it. So we did talk day one about human-animal contact, where it benefits both humans and animals around us. So if we have all those chickens around us, if you want to, you can feed them manually. If you choose not to, then of course we can automate that process as well. Health. A lot of health discussions that I've heard recently revolve around medication and what to do to treat illnesses and things like that. It's unfortunate that the rest of the world, the rest of the industrialized world, looks at health very differently. Again, another one of those things in the shift in thought process. Try to prevent it rather than treat it. So having your health should be a very high priority. There's a plethora of benefits that you can gain from simply just jogging around on the moon. And I mean, who wouldn't want to jump around in low gravity? It's almost like a trampoline, right? Education. This should be the responsibility of everyone. Education is incredibly important for our society. This is how we're able to teach our children to not do what we've done wrong and how to do the right thing in the future. So this is a little bit more philosophical, but I think education needs to be considered if we're going to especially if we're going to expand our civilization to the moon and beyond. The basics should be learned by everyone, so everybody should know how to use duct tape for everything. There should be specialists, of course, but everyone should know how to fix small problems. So, the things like a broken bone, obviously you need a doctor, but everybody should be able to learn how to set one, and how everybody should learn CPR. I know that there was a movement in the past of when I was in school, like everybody learned how to resuscitate, how to bring somebody back to life just by helping them out, by breathing into their mouth and by pushing on their heart, by pumping their heart. I'm not sure if that's practiced nowadays in school anymore. Technology should be used sparingly. I know all of us have looked around and have seen the phone zombies. You know, like to me, that's a little bit of I don't know. It's just maybe I'm getting older, but we need to consider the fact that there are humans around us, and the only way that we can increase the benefits of our relationship is by actually looking up away from the phone once in a while. So yeah, we can have technology and it's great and it's going to get us to the moon and back and whatnot and into space and beyond, but definitely be responsible with it. So my favorite saying is, another one of my favorite sayings is, give a man a fish and you feed him for a day, teach a man to fish and you feed him for a lifetime. So this is where education, the educational system should be based on some kind of concept like this. See, there's something else. Okay, I got this. All right, society. No system of control. We've seen what systems of controls do. They collapse. They collapse, and when they crash, there's revolutions, there's wars, all sorts of stuff. Money, religion, work, laws, all these things that have been put into place. This is from what I've observed, living in multiple countries, on multiple continents, and from speaking with other people about these sort of ideas and philosophies and concepts. And it just seems like, you know, watching how the equality gap is getting greater in the US, these are facts. It's not like somebody's making this stuff up and just saying it's like, oh, the numbers are bigger now, or the gap is bigger just because I said so. It's not a belief. It's a fact. It's listed. It's calculated. Yeah. So money segregates and generates greed. Religion should, and I love all religions equally. I've started reading as many religious texts as I could for the philosophical factor. But again, we've seen religion turn into big business in this country, and we have to be careful of avoiding that. Work should be, again, task-based, going back to work, jobs, should be task-based to allow for more human interaction instead of profit. Laws, and of course, finally, laws don't work. I've actually spoken with a couple of you guys during our lunches, and one proof of that is texting while driving laws. How many of us still do it? At least you're honest. Exactly. But here's the thing. There was a research that was done, and that showed that there are now more texting and driving accidents than there were before these laws were implemented. And the simple fact is this. Back before the laws were implemented, we would drive like this, right? So our peripheral vision could still see the road, for the most part. There were less accidents. So the law was implemented, which means everybody should have stopped texting while driving. Instead, what happens? Right? How do you avoid accidents? I mean, you can't force people to you can't tell them what to do. What you have to do is step back a little bit and understand that you need to educate them. This is back to education. We need to educate people in order to let them understand that this sort of behavior is not really progressive. It's not really healthy for us. So the texting while driving, and more on the legal side, if there's conflict, go through the 7 whys. And you usually don't have to go through all 7 of them. By the 4th or 5th, you usually find out what happened. But what happens in today's world, we're very reactive. We go up to an employee and go, why did you do this? Oh, because my boss told me to. Well, you're fired. Instead of finding out the root of the problem and go, oh, okay, let's go to your boss. Hey, boss, why'd you tell him to do this? Oh, because I think the stockholders are going to not like this and that. Well, did you talk to them? No. Let's go talk to them. Okay, go talk to them. You find out that the stockholders usually don't like it when you risk their company in such a way so that, yeah, you do gain profit, but you also lose value, and you lose the core ethics of your company. So just a little bit of communication in the communication chain could avoid all of these issues. And again, what I just did there was 3 whys. There was a book by Don Norman, I'll reference it later, that talked about user experience and usability. Great book. I highly recommend everybody reads it. But it talks about this and how a lot of errors, a lot of misunderstandings in our court system could be completely eliminated just by following some basic practices. Yes, it does take a little more time, but the outcome is amazing. You don't have as much shame in your society. You don't have as much negative impact in your society. and beyond. All this technology already exists, as I mentioned before. We just need to apply it. So think of the Lego block concept, right? We already have it. Instead of try it out on Earth. Instead of going out to a space station or the moon or Mars, think of the Mars rover, right? Do we build it and just send it to Mars? No, we took it in the desert. We tested it out here on Earth. We did so many tests on it. We tested the crap out of it before we even thought of putting it in a rocket ship and send it out there. I'm saying, oh, we're going to build a lunar base underground? Well, let's try building it here. Oh, the gravity is going to be different? Okay, let's adjust for that. Let's say that we put our vegetables and fruit in a centrifuge. Christoph, he brought that idea. It was a great idea, by the way. So if your vegetables or your trees or plants don't necessarily grow better in lower gravity, put them in a centrifugal device and just let them spin. You got solar power, nuclear power, powering it up. You'll be fine. When you want to pick a legume or whatever, you can slow it down or stop it, pick whatever you need, start it up again. So yeah, then you can, again, incrementally, don't just jump into don't put all your eggs in one basket. Just try it out slowly, try it out on Earth. The original Biosphere project, this happened 25 years ago, I believe. And I remember when I watched it on TV, and things went wrong with it. But we didn't do anything about the Biosphere project since. We're kind of discussing it now. But how is that considered science? How are we scientists? We tried it once, it failed, forget about it. No, we need to test it again, see what went wrong, adjust it, change the variables, try it again. Oh, this failed this time. Okay, great, try it again. Look at the lunar missions, right? I believe Apollo 1 is the one that crashed, right? It didn't even make it. So there were so many accidents that we've had. But do we stop? Not at all. And scientists love failure because they at least get an answer. But it's worse when you don't even have an answer. Yeah, so then you build your generation ships and take them off into space. Your grandkids, great-grandkids, they can reap the benefits of Alpha Centauri wine or whatever it is we're going to come up with out there. And yeah, go Interstellar. Yeah, these are the references to, some of the references that I really liked. That one says Scrum, but it's a little too low. But the book that I really suggest everybody gets is The Design of Everyday Things. This book kind of changed, or not kind of, it did change my perspective on the way the world has been designed and how we like to make things look cool, but they're not functional. In a Polish post office, they built 2 sets of glass doors. No panels, you couldn't tell where the hinges were, no handles, nothing. And the doors only opened one way. You could see people get trapped in the middle, in between the two rows of glass. They wouldn't know what to do. They'd push on one end, nothing. This one, nothing. Turn around, nothing. And to make it even more difficult, not all the panels would swing. So it was like door, glass, door, glass. Yeah, you could get stuck. It was like a maze. So we need to consider that. So when I say design of everyday things and accessibility is hugely important, I believe Jess touched on it early on when she said we have to consider the functionality for everybody up there. I'm saying, yeah, including the people that are not necessarily what we call disabled. Like even for us, yeah, it can look cool, but if it doesn't work, what's the use? This one is one of my favorite websites to visit. Just Google if the moon were only 1 pixel. It's in the PowerPoint presentation. If you guys want to click on it, go for it. Just to kind of give you an idea, because I don't, every time I show this to somebody, they go, wow, and a big wow. Because I don't think people understand exactly how big our solar system is and how much space there really is. So if the moon was 1 pixel, and this would be Earth, little blue dot, you can barely see it. This is where the scroll bar is right now. It's quite a long way to go all the way to Pluto, isn't it? So this is it. This is the sun. This is Earth. That's where that is. And this is how big things are. Everybody's perception of the solar system is skewed because we always look at images of big planets and they're so close to each other and we think, oh yeah, it's not that far. Yeah, I highly suggest you go through here and you start scrolling through it. And you get so sick of scrolling. And then you get to Mercury. You're like, oh, crap. And then of course, there's shortcut buttons at the top that you can go through. But yeah, I thank you. This has been an amazing experience for me. I hope for you as well. And yeah, enjoy the rest of the show. Thank you. Questions, comments?
Thank you very much, George. We have questions for a speaker?
Did I misunderstand? Were you suggesting that an ideal lunar colony would be one with no jobs, no money, and no laws?
Yeah, you'd be surprised.
I would be surprised.
If you put like-minded people like ourselves up there, then yeah, you'd be surprised as to the amount of tasks that we can accomplish together. It sounds idealistic, but it's incredible what you can accomplish with like-minded people. Yeah. So he said when you get the non-like-minded person, what happens? There's ways to handle it, and I think a unity of the like-minded people would end up saying, okay, well, we need to deal with this, start going through the 7 whys, don't call it rehabilitation because that also has a negative connotation on it. Just go through it and try to understand, why are you not like-minded? What is it that throws you off? What is it that you're not happy about? What is it that we can all do in order to help you understand what's going on here? And if you want to go back to Earth, sure, just wait for the next shuttle.
On the slide where you were suggesting that laws don't work but education does, that kind of implies that people don't understand that texting is dangerous, which I don't think is actually accurate. I suggest looking into some of the theories of safety trainings that companies need to do. And a lot of what they have found out is that it's not so much lack of education, because even though you can have safety training constantly in a company, accidents will still occur. You have to engineer things so that the benefit of not doing it outweighs the benefit of doing it. Like with speeding, people they like to sleep in, so now they're late to work, so now they speed. So you have to engineer and design things so that they don't do that instead of just educating them.
Yeah. A great point you bring up. People like speeding because they overslept. Why don't we ask the 7 whys? Why did they oversleep? Well, they're overworked. Most likely it comes down from their being overworked. Work is killing us. Benjamin Franklin himself has said that in the future technology will be so advanced that we will only be working 3 hours a week. Not a day, but 3 hours a week. And unfortunately, the Industrial Revolution kind of did a 180 on that and ended up having our children work 16-hour days. We need to shift from that paradigm. We need to get away from that. That's unhealthy for us. So yeah, if you had all the time in the world, would you speed? Most likely not. And it's another debate if speed actually kills. But, it's for another day maybe.
That's why I'm suggesting it's more of an engineering design problem.
Yeah.
It's an education problem.
Yes. I agree with you. There should, halfway, there should be both. Both should be involved. It should be engineered and then educated to the public. Yeah.
Okay, let's thank our speaker. Let's thank our speaker.
Oh. Thank you, guys.